sharing that I knew that she had gone down there this week, and I'd asked her to offer our Kairos moment this morning, much because of the fact of what you've been a part of this week, and what the world is going through as well. And this idea of where we find the light. The reason why I wanted the Grinch is because I was struck by that last line. There's always going to be Christmas as long as there's we. As long as there's a we. And that's, I think, the hardest thing, because when we see this story in the Gospel of Luke, we always see this story as kind of God pitted against the world, or the light pitted against the darkness. Whereas many of us who've been in moments of darkness in our lives, or maybe we're going through some of it now and maybe struggling a bit, we often find the light is brightest there, right? When we suddenly discover there's always been a light there present with us, maybe it was actually even within us, but we just didn't know how to tap into it. And life is filled with so many folks and so many realities on all sides of the spectrum, on all along the line of the spectrum of joy, of happiness, of kindness and generosity, of hate and bigotry and exclusiveness and meanness. But it's all along the same spectrum. And what may be simply missing is what I think the story really is speaking about. I think it was Meister Eckhart that said, what good is it if Jesus is born in the world and there's nothing born in you? If there's no light born in you, if there's no life or love born in you or in us, right? That's the challenge, is finding where that light. And so I love people like Brian Doyle. I love moments like Carrie and Laura Smith, which many of you know about their story, and their wonderful dog Jazzy. And if you don't know it, the BBC actually did an article about it as well. You just need to get online and look up Jazzy. There you go, Texan reunited with his dog after 7 years. But it's a beautiful story, and how that could happen, and how a dog would end up from getting away here in the DFW area and then somehow ending up in Florida. There's so much to this story, but the reuniting is such a beautiful thing. There's so many ways we find God, or we find love, or we find light, or we find hope in the midst of our lives. But the challenge is this opening up to it, right? The challenge is being present. And all of our moments are opportunities for that. We're looking for answers, which is why I sometimes think we read the story of Luke as an either-or, as a binary kind of God has to come in and save things. When I think the real love story there is the real love story is saying we need to love ourselves. We need to love ourselves deeply enough that we're willing to take risks to show others this love as well. That we're willing to open up and be vulnerable to encounter others in such a way that when we finally are able, in the darkest times that we find ourselves, able to look at the mirror and go, oh wait, I see God. I see hope, I see light, I see life, I see love. If we're able to do that in such a profound way that we truly feel freed from all of the stuff that we tend to hang ourselves up with, I think we become enough of a light that others can come to see that as well. I think that's what the challenge of these stories are, to step out of seeing things as either or and to see it all as part of the same thing. The way I was once taught it was like, sometimes we find ourselves like we're like a wave, and we're really working hard to figure out who we are, and we forget we're the ocean. We're just a wave in the midst of the ocean. And so are all those folks along that spectrum, until at some point people begin to feel like they belong. We have to remind everyone they belong. So there's this last little quick story I'm going to read, and then we'll have our final song here. I love this song. I love this story. It actually reminded me of a time way back when I remember being somewhere off in southwest Texas. It's as if I kind of remember it was happening yesterday, and I remember... That was awesome. And I was invited to go King Ranch And I think I'll just share this a moment. Instead of reading this, I'll save this for for New Year. But I was invited to go to King Ranch. I don't know how many of you have been to King Ranch, but I was at a library conference as a storyteller and children's author, and this woman came up to me, and all she said with a sigh was, "I would love to have you, but you would never come to us." And I said, "Well, why wouldn't I?" She said, "Because we're just way out in the middle of nowhere." And I said, "Well, then I want to be there." And she said, no, we're hard to find, and I don't know that you'd want to come. And I said, so I challenged her, and sure enough, we made the arrangements, and I landed in Corpus Christi. And your story, DeAndrea, of wandering around kind of the long way reminded me of that, because I didn't have GPS back then, and I ended up in Kingsville instead of at the King Ranch. And then I drove from store to store or from gas station to gas station to anyone that could say, well, how do I get to the school that's on the King Ranch? And they would kind of direct me, but you had to go around the ranch, which is huge. You know, you had to go around part of the ranch, the southern part of it, to find the entrance. And then you're literally driving across pastures and just this wide open area. There's no, I'm thinking, how can a school be out here? Maybe cows, maybe cattle, maybe horses. There's a school out here. And sure enough, eventually you see a very small, almost village-like complex, including the elementary school. And when I showed up there, it was lunchtime, because I was doing an afternoon performance. And so I went into the cafeteria to get set up, and I met a woman whose name was Rosita. And Rosita was the lunch lady. And I met her because she was singing behind the counter as the children were coming through. She would know their names, and she would sing each of their names as they would come through. And then she would just start singing in kind of a strange melody. Would you like some peas today? Peas are very good for you, I'd say. And she would just rhyme randomly, and then they'd all laugh, and they'd say, sure, because why else are they going to take peas unless somebody's going to sing it to them? And they would get their different dishes, and then she would just sing them along the way. And afterwards, I kind of got to know her a little bit, and she said, I would never sing in public. And I kind of smiled, and I said, but you know, I can't imagine these children ever forgetting how you sang life to them every day at lunchtime, in the midst of whatever else was going on at home or struggles in class, wherever they find themselves throughout the week. They come here, and you sing life to them every day at lunch. And she just had this beaming smile as if she just realized she was God. She just discovered she was being God in these moments. And it's almost too much to take. I'm wishing for you this holiday season. I know some of you are going to be with family that's difficult. Some of you are in the hospital right now. I know that because I've been in touch with you. Some of you have had difficult seasons, some of you have had a difficult year, and it's making this season all the more difficult. But what I wish for you, what I know for you, is that as we settle into even this difficulty, even as we settle into the dark time, the challenging time, take a moment to look into the mirror and remind yourself you're a wave of something huge and beautiful and life-giving. Give it to yourself. Be generous to yourself. All it is, it's just God's love. It's just the potentiality of creativity and life and hope and being that's already with us all. Amen.